The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Well, God, we give you thanks for this parish, which has woven our lives together with your life, the life of Christ, the life of your Spirit, that has woven our lives together with each other. We give you thanks for the way that you move through our history to call and send and redeem us, and to make us revelations of you, your love, and your life in our world. As we open our bicentennial, knowing, sharing, and making our history, we ask you to bless these 2.5 years. Maybe these be a time where we come to know ourselves more fully, know you more deeply, and walk with you more faithfully. And I ask this in Jesus Christ. Amen. So before we start, I want to check with Katie to make sure we're recording. That is indeed happening. And I want to check with the people on Zoom that you can, in fact, hear us. And that's also working fantastic. If you are on Zoom, we welcome your questions, but because of the way we have it set up today, you're going to have to put your questions into the chat, and then Katie will be your voice into the room. Now, as I am saying in my sermon today, a bicentennial is a funny sort of time. It's a time when you look back and attempt to sum up your past, your 200 years, your 250 years, your past. And you become very aware of that, and you're paused in the present, but then you're also aware of what's coming or what you may be doing, how you may go into the future. So you see, you have the past, and you're paused, celebrating, and then wondering, how is God going to move through the past and the present and then tell us in a new way or a new faithfulness into the future? Past, present, and future are all here in a bicentennial celebration. Now, this work of the bicentennial could not the work, but the historical work that grounds the bicentennial could not have been done without your former rector, Brooks Graebner, who is just amazingly gifted in all this and roused the Archives Committee into being. And we have this amazing Archives Committee headed by Elaine, in which they've detailed so many things. And Alan Cronenberg has written a history about the parish, and they're working on those things. But we go into the bicentennial, yes, learning about our history. A lot of that's been offered. We're going to go more deeply into it, but all that's based on the work of Brooks and the Archives Committee, which is why Elaine is here today to tell us about how we will approach our history or some things going on in it. And Chris Peterson is the chair of the Bicentennial Committee, which started out with 12 people sitting in a room and saying, what do we want to do? I don't know. Let's have a dog show. That sounds great. In historical costumes. That'd be fantastic. Like, no, it's not so good. And eventually we got it together into a really amazing program stretching over 2.5 years. And we will learn more about this in the course of this program. But as like a spoiler, there's like, we're going to have contra dancing. If that doesn't excite you, nothing will. Right? For that historical period, we're going to have the re-signing of a lay charter in September. So in 200 years ago, they celebrated, they signed a charter organizing St. Matthew's, and we're going to do that again. All of you being a part of that. There's just some really super cool stuff going on. So all that being said, I want to hand it over first to Chris to talk about how we came about planning this bicentennial. And then Elaine will take us further into the timeline and other historical features. Thank you.
I still think the dog show has merit. We're still workshopping it. It might happen. We'll see. But if there's interest, let me know. See what we can do. So you might be asking, how do you tackle a multi-year celebration of 200 plus years of history? And as Robert mentioned, you start with an amazing group of creative and thoughtful people who make up the Bicentennial Committee. And I know there are a lot of them in the room. And if y'all will just raise your hands if you're part of that committee, the work that these people have done has been amazing. So you take the work of this committee and you throw in years worth of work and research by the Archives Committee, by Brooks Graebner, by Sally Green, work from Lisa Frost Phillips, from Robert, and you end up with this dynamic compilation of events that are rich in history and purpose. And even with all this wonderful history to share and learn about, we still had to figure out how to share it in a way that makes sense and that would be meaningful, because 200 years is a long time, and 2.5 years of celebrations are a lot of celebrating. So we hope we have found that balance. Each year of the celebrations, starting in 2024 and extending through 2026, will focus on a specific period in history. And you can get a preview of this from the timeline that the Archives Committee has put together. So 2024 will focus on these years, which is 1750 to 1850. There will be special emphasis on the lives of lay people and Black persons in the formation of St. Matthew's. Also, as Robert alluded, look for a very special celebration with the bishop in September, where we will ask the congregation to sign a new lay charter for the church. In 2025, we will turn to 1850 to 1950. And there will be a special focus on the parish's collaboration with and relationship to the diocese, especially highlighting the work of Brooks Graebner and Bishop Curry on the issue of racial reckoning that is now central to the diocesan mission. In 2026, we will highlight events from 1950 to the present, while also exploring the church, the churchyard, and other buildings. Now, we've laid out how we're going to present it, but what exactly are we going to do? You might be wondering, what kind of events can we expect to see? And there is quite the variety. And I believe you have a handout highlighting what you'll see in 2024. There will be concerts, there will be special services, a contra dance that's appropriate with the time period. There will also be lectures and forums and panel discussions that give us opportunities to explore all aspects of our history, both the good and the challenging. I believe there is one correction I want to make on the handout for next Sunday for Alan Cronenberg. It says January 14th. It's actually January 21st. So I hope you will all be here for that lecture. And again, I cannot say enough about the wonderful work that has been done and continues to be done by the Bicentennial Committee. We hope you all come away from these events with a deeper understanding of our history, how we got to the place we are today, and how this forms how we move forward. And now I'm going to turn it over to Elaine.
I might just start by saying that as we were thinking about the actual bicentennial events over that period, there are really 3 bicentennial features that we're considering: the 1824 reorganization of the parish and the signing of the charter. The second one is the 1825 union with the diocese. And the final one is the 1826 completion of the building of the church and its consecration. So those are really the 3 big bicentennial events, and we're working in this whole study of our history within that context. So the Parish Archives and History Committee got together and was organized in 2011. So we're approaching 13 years of looking at our history and organizing our parish records. And one of the charges to our committee was to present historical programs about our history. And those of you who've been here a while know that we did that quite faithfully in our spring heritage events each year, pre-pandemic. And then that sort of put a dent in things. So we are coming back with a real bang here with our bicentennial events. As we did those programs, though, we were looking at like one little piece of our history. And it's been a real joy to now consider the whole sweep of it. And the vestry asked us to prepare a kind of timeline to mark the milestone events in our history. And that's what we've attempted to do with these timeline boards here for the first 100 years that we'll be considering in our first year of our bicentennial celebration. So even before the organization of the reorganization in 1824, we had that whole Anglican period from 1752 to 1800 when the original St. Matthew's Church of England, established church, was on the site of the present Presbyterian Church. And so there's that history there, and we'll be having a look at that next week when Alan will be featuring the colonial and revolutionary period. And as you know, with the coming of the American Revolution, there was a dissolution of the established Church of England, and there were some years, kind of wilderness years there, where not much was happening. But and then in 1824, we reorganized and started yet again. So we divided this history to the Anglican period on our first timeline board there, and then the formation of the diocese and the charter and early years with the first founding rector, William Mercer Green, which brings us to 1838. And then we had Reverend Fruit, and followed by Curtis, and then the lead up to the Civil War. So that's where we're heading this year. And in a way, I think we're thinking of this as a kind of a way to connect the dots, or these little squares here. And this is kind of the sort of the known facts, but I think in the course of our investigations, there will be some little known history, some unknown history, and we'll be kind of adding little notes and added items as we uncover some other things that we come upon in the course of our study together. So that was one of our big projects. And I do want to say that the other very important thing to us in the Archives Committee has been, of course, our most important and treasured document, the Parish Register of 1824 to 1881. And this was beautifully restored in 2018. And this is indeed the book that includes the charter page that we will be featuring with the people who signed that first document in 1824. Now, this was recopied because the original document was prepared by William Mercer Green. And after he left and went to UNC to teach and to start the Chapel of the Cross eventually over there, the next rector, who was Fruit, got a hold of William Mercer Green's personal register and copied into this book all of that information about the signings, the very early baptisms, even some that occurred before 1824 in this area. And it's just a beautiful book with 4 or 5 different rectors' handwriting, and we have returned to it time and time again. In addition to all the entries of baptisms, confirmations, marriages, burials. There are also some sections on history. And it's, you think about these rectors entering this note. Here's something important to remember. And we've really come to love this book. And the more we've worked with it, the more we can kind of feel the weight of the deaths of up to like 90 babies and young children, and the the marriages, and it's just the more you know, the more you care, and the more you love, the more you love it. And so, our affection for this whole enterprise has really grown over the years. And we'd say that there have been some times when we've had very interesting presentations across the years here at important events. And there were a few that I missed, and I thought to myself, I should have made just a little extra effort to get there because something important happened and I wasn't a part of it. And so we're all here. We have no regrets this morning. We're all starting in, and we hope you'll keep coming back. So in addition to the timeline, the other thing that Archives has been working on has been the Bicentennial publication. And we had proposed marking this period with some kind of publication. I mean, if you don't do something to celebrate 200 years, when might you, So we had already a good start with the excellent work that Alan Cronenberg had done after the retirement of Rick Scribner. Alan thought it would be helpful to the search committee and also informative to our candidates for rectorship to have an idea of St. Matthew's history. And so Alan set about writing what he called a brief history, although it became less brief the more we know. Well, it's a little less brief now. We'll be featuring, starting from the kernel of that work, it's going to be revised, expanded, and brought up to date and illustrated. And I think it will be a lovely publication. So we're working on that, and we are intent on having it ready by our gala celebration in September on St. Matthew's Day, when we'll hope that when we put it up for sale, you'll find it of interest. And so both the book and the timeline, we hope, will be kind of markers along the way. And we'll be adding then the next year other panels and the following year. And we'll be literally surrounding ourselves with the history that we want to share. And as I was talking with John about this, he was talking about how this is a collective memory. These are our congregational stories, and it's our collective memory. And you think about the memories that you have of your own lives and how that's all part of who you are. And this kind of collective memory is a part of who we all are at this point. And you take where all you've been and you marshal your energies to go forward into the future that you want to prepare for yourselves and for our community. So those are some of the threads that we've been trying to pull together and make a coherent whole. So that's been our work, and we hope that will be of service. Thank you.
So it's now back to me, but I think one thing Elaine said was just really striking, could have been actually the title for this whole thing. But the more you know, the more you care. And isn't that so true? The more you know, the more you care. And that's been a theme we've been working on for the past, I don't know, many years before I came, but then after I came, and about knowing the history and the way that opens our hearts to caring, opens us to compassion, opens us to reaching out. And so part of the Bicentennial is going to certainly be these institutional, like, huge milestones that the Archives Committee has so beautifully created. And then Lisa and I are going to work with creating like a flow around it of the life of the freed Black and enslaved persons who gave their lives so that this institutional history could happen. They didn't give them willingly, their lives were taken, but then used to be the foundation for this history. And so we'll be working with that as well. The more you know, the more you care. So I'm going to end with a little reflection on why we celebrate our bicentennial. They always say why is the most important thing. So why do we celebrate a bicentennial? Well, it'd be, as Elaine said, just bizarre not to, or hinted at that. It'd be like not celebrating your golden anniversary with your wife. You might no longer have a wife. And in this case, you know, the faithful spouse to the parish has been the suffering, loving, and rejoicing Lord who gives us his Spirit. And in a way, it's the celebration of that Spirit of Jesus with us that we are doing in this bicentennial, 2024 to 2026. So it'd be bizarre not to do this, right? Be like, what happened at St. Matthew's? They just forgot about their bicentennial. But it's also going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be extraordinary fun. I mean, I will dress up for the contra dancing night. We have faith and arts concerts planned. You can see it all. We have these lectures. We have this lay ministry thing. We have various things going on. And I think that's going to help the parish to kind of build new fellowship, build new enjoyment in our life together. And all of that's really, really vital. But our bicentennial is going to do more with us than just that. When we celebrate our bicentennial as a Christian community, we are inevitably going to engage with stories that tell us about ourselves. And they tell us about ourselves both in the sense of we get to see possibilities for ourselves that we never thought of, and we also get to see dangers for ourselves that perhaps we hadn't fully reckoned with. Like I always think of Frodo when I talk like this, Lord of the Rings. And I've said this before in a forum, I'll say it again. You're reading Lord of the Rings and Frodo's going through Mordor, and you're there with Frodo, and every step is his step, and you get a sense of a possibility. Could I live like that? Could I live with like my life being totally expended out of care for the community? Could I go through that kind of suffering? Or could I also face that kind of betrayal? Could I also engage that kind of betrayal as Frodo was tempted to do? When we hear stories, we instinctively see ourselves in those stories. And when we do that, we glimpse new possibilities for how we might be in our world, and also things that we could do and could be that perhaps we don't face directly. So we're going to discover stories of great faithfulness and courage and goodness, stories of God doing great things in people's lives. And when we hear those things, we'll get glimmers of new possibilities for ourselves. Like, wow, could that be possible for me too? And not only goodness, but sheer eccentricity. Like Moses Ashley Curtis out hunting mushrooms and becoming a noted fungologist or whatever you call that. Like, learn in St. Matthew's. You can't get by for a moment. I mean, and you know, I think when we hear stories of that kind of, and there's beautiful stories of like eccentricity and a little bit of, you know, craziness in our parish history, and that opens us up to like just sharing those things helps us to relish more widely what we can be as humans. But on the other hand, because we're fallen creatures living in a fallen world, whenever we engage history, we also discover stories that show where pressures from this fallen world, social, economic, and political, have driven professing Christians into choices inimical to the gospel. So pressures from a fallen world driving Christians coming to church into choices inimical to the gospel, opposite to the life of Jesus. And if we are at all reflective in our faith, we get way past way past that knee-jerk kind of righteous condemnation of those other bad people. And we begin to think like, gosh, that's possible for me too. Ooh, okay. So the history presents us both with the possibilities of what we could be, the eccentricities of like just the wildness of being human, but also shows us what we as humans can do. It's a warning about the pressures of this world pushing us in directions opposite to our baptismal vows. So, one way of talking about this is that I hope that as we engage our history, why we are doing this is fun, yes, and fellowship. But secondly, our history, our bicentennial, is going to encourage in us a new humility about ourselves, but also a faith in God who doesn't just look at history and say, whoops, I wasn't there. And sometimes that's how we imagine history. It's God just saying, whoops, I didn't mean for that to happen. Too bad. But we have a God who has come to be alongside of us in every moment of our history and is chronically, constantly working for the redemption of that history, for using that history to unite us with each other and with God's life more and more. And this is the program we've been on for a couple of years now. As I said again in my sermon today, it's about this discovery of a God who joins with our history, works with it, and uses it to become the foundation of new mission in the world. The more you know, add some grace, the more you care. The more you know, add a lot of grace, the more God's compassion and care for this world can become a living thing in you. That seems reasonable. But there's one last thing, one last why, and that we are a historic community. We've been here, at least in our pre-Episcopal form since 1752. We're embedded at the core of the history of Hillsborough, Orange County, and North Carolina. And so how we tell our history, how we go about celebrating it, becomes a huge point of connection with the world around us. And where I'm going with this, and this is particularly with our history with enslavement at the foundation of this parish, and the violence against the Black community that followed the Civil War, this gives us, because we are in that history, in the middle of North Carolina, in the middle of Orange County, in the middle of Hillsborough, with that history, as a Christian community, believing in the gospel of Jesus Christ, we have a platform at that because of our history to act as healing agents for God's love and reconciliation with the world around us. Like it gives us a very meaningful entree to begin to address those questions of racial divide and rage that are still present in our world today. Like Sunday morning, the most segregated morning in America. Certainly in Hillsborough. I was talking recently with Tony Voss, the pastor of Piney Grove Missionary Baptist, and we're planning with Hillsborough Presbyterian a series of joint worship services for the coming year. So we'll all get together, and that's meant to be a platform to engage the other parishes in town, and Dickerson Chapel included. And I hope also that these new relationships of getting to know and pray with and appreciate the community of Piney Grove Missionary Baptist, which is nearly 100% Black, that's 100% white, that these relationships might give us a kind of a sensitivity to how we go about thinking about a memorial to the enslaved persons on this campus. What would that look like from their point of view? What might we want to do? How do we might do that in relationship with them? In any case, as we were talking, Pastor Tony said that during his time with COVID, in which he was in the ICU on a ventilator for several months, and they had come in and they were ready to unplug the ventilator like 4 or 5 times, multiple times, and his wife said, no, don't do it yet. Pastor Tony said that God changed his heart, that he has his own little fiefdom down there in Piney Grove. He's the pastor, which in the Baptist world means you're like king. But he began to understand that not only will there be white and black and every other kind of folks in heaven together, reconciled and celebrating under God, under Christ, but our call on earth now is to practice that heaven. And in a great way, he said, heaven is game time, but now we have to practice. So he said, that's why I'm doing this with you. And already there's been some beautiful moments where, because we have paid attention to Piney Grove Baptist, as in Tony's words, they feel like they're somebody. They felt like they were nobodies before, but because they're being invited into a larger community, not just in their fiefdom, but with us, they're like, we are somebody in Hillsborough. We're somebody. And that is a very poignant realization of what we mean by reconciliation and repairing the damage that's gone before. Just because we know, so we decided to care, so we decided to extend and build relationships and then see how those relationships evolved. So our bicentennial, I think, should be a great deal of fun, that fellowship and fun in the present with the past and wondering about the future. It's going, if we do this right, to deepen our humility about ourselves, which is always a good thing. As I said, humility feels, when you have humility, you have more joy, you have more happiness. They're directly correlated. Don't ask me for the numbers on that. But the spiritual teaching is humility and joy go together. So it will develop in us humility if we do this right, but a humility that has that joyous capacity to connect with people at Piney Grove and elsewhere and celebrate life and discover new potential for ourselves and for them. And faith in God, like, wow, holy cow. Because we approached our history in this way, our hearts were open in that way. So now we find ourselves loving more in this way and celebrating more in the life of God and in each other across Hillsborough. And holy cow, we're beginning to undo the divisions that have divided humanity in this place. That's kind of amazing. That's like an amazing why to go about this. So let's tie on the cleats. This is a Pauline illusion. Faith as our firm footing, faith in Christ who loves everybody. God doesn't say whoops to a human life and walk away, ever. Whoops. God engages every human life with love and care. So with faith in that God, that's our cleats and our helmet of, I'll say prayer. Helmet of prayer. Keep our heads from getting concussions. We can join in God's practice. So I will end, we'll open this for some questions. I'll end by saying that we do have this new website. It's been up for about 8 months now, 9 months. but there's a Bicentennial page, and everything Bicentennial is going onto that page. So it has its own page. It'll be a massive resource. The program's on there, even with the typo. We'll correct that soon. But go there to find out everything. And Katie, have we shared up with the folks online yet the timelines and the fantastic? So with that, I'll open this up to questions. Myself or Elaine or Chris. Thoughts or wonderments? Elizabeth.
I'm curious, because you probably have much more you're going to share, so it's more like I'm jumping ahead. But obviously on the timeline, we see the old white men rectors and city women. So we know that, you know, there was 200 years of Ultra Guild and tending the graveyard and polishing the silver and, you know, needlework, hand needlework for the linens and all that stuff. So, but often, you know, that's what's recorded in your ledger, your white men's activities. Do we have diaries or anything about what the life of the women in this church was like?
So we do. And Ellen Wigg might be tempted to come back and talk about that. And that's another, so you have standard institutional history here, and it is indeed on this all white men. But that's why we want to flow through it, a history of the enslaved, come around it, but also begin to do some work to talk about the lives of women and the ministry of women in this place. And that's another stream we need to bring in as well.
We do have Miss Lizzie on there. There's no picture of her, though. We've searched and searched, couldn't find anything. We also will be, in the next panel, will be the post-Civil War era when the Ladies Sewing Society got started and such an active group from 1866 to 1900. So still more to come, more history.
More to come.
And as we go through the history, the women become more allowed to be more engaged in our history.
And know that that has come up in our committee meetings. We're like, we want to represent the big part that the women played in the formation.
I remember Ellen Wigg saying to me, well, what was it like for Mrs. Curtis when Moses was off hunting mushrooms all over the world? Jahan, you had a question.
Yeah, at first I just want to thank the committee because this is amazing work. So thank you. And then I wanted to ask about, I mean, just sort of looking around and looking at the events, it looks like a lot of these might be harder for younger families to participate in. And I just wonder if that's come up or ways to do that, to encourage that, and maybe even for kids. So I was just wondering about that. The conjure dance is a great example of something to be excited about.
So maybe providing childcare for the kids,
that kind of thing.
so there's that kind of thing, also the timing of the programs.
Yeah.
And I think that would be something that, like, if you have particular things in mind, Jahan, the thing to do would be to write and send them to Chris.
I will try to think.
Well, but to that point, we have tried to incorporate all age levels. So in having activities like picnics where kids are welcome, but also I believe Kara Drake is working on a coloring book of the stained glass windows that would go like to godly play. And so we've talked about doing like a time capsule or having a scavenger hunt on the ground. So we are keeping that in mind.
I knew you would be.
Yeah, there are multiple years to come.
Yeah, and I was even thinking, like, what if you brought this to Taco Wednesday or something like that?
Yes.
Just something that already exists.
Use those Wednesday nights as a time to engage families, and there has been the intention to have this connect with the youth program as well, the adolescents.
Oh, great. I love seeing it go down the line.
Repeat the questions for people on Zoom.
I will do that. Are there other questions? Yeah,
Is there any
Ken.
intent, or maybe you've already done it, to publish the document that goes back to the early history that you were talking about, or you have in your lap?
To publish the parish register?
So the question is, have we attempted to publish the entire parish register?
Well, we do have a PDF file of the entire contents that could be shared. We haven't thought about republishing it, but we will be doing the bicentennial history, but it's beautiful.
But that's fascinating. I don't know if there's any downside to putting the PDF on our website. I don't know.
I don't think so. It's one document that includes 2 registers and a Sunday school book and a couple of other things, but
More information than you could ever want. And I'm like a little appalled that you're not wearing white gloves. Like, what a sacred thing.
When it was restored, the restorer said it's good for a book to be held and to be opened and get some air and breath and love that.
I mean, as your rector right now, when I'm writing our register, I'm like, I'm just gonna go down in history. I mean, it feels very profound. It's like really cool. And then like, that's the ink. Like somebody actually touched that page and went across it with a pen and made those marks. It's extraordinary.
Crossed out things.
I cross out things.
I have a question about that, Elaine. Where, way back before, when archives was getting started or whatever, where was that?
So the question is, where was the?
It was in the bottom drawer of in the parish office, and things were all over the place. We had things in the youth room, undercroft. There were mice had been in there too, and so we sort of went around, collected everything we could find, and cleaned it up and organized it. And we have digitized most of the important parish minutes and bulletins and annual reports and parochial reports and all of those kinds of documents and all of our historical programs. And
It's phenomenal work. Our archives committee is amazing. And I'm not just saying that to hype things up. I mean, they just simply are the best of the best. And if you want to test that, just go email Elaine a question this afternoon. Like, do you have any records about church parties in 1874? See what happens. We're just so lucky to have that already built as we go into our bicentennial. Elizabeth again.
Second question. This is so cool. The academic in me is going, I hope this is being shared with like the state archives or UNC history department or Wilson Library or something, because this is historical work that I can picture a master's or PhD student do a thesis on at some point, or it's documentation of the history here.
And I think a lot of our work has come from those archives. So certainly would be open to that.
We discover
Yeah.
the things
Yeah.
added into it. When somebody pulls a diary out of their attic and finds some kind of artifact or something.
You want to have that more permanently recorded
And shared.
and shared.
Yeah.
And the first, yep, good point. We should definitely do that. And we have time for one last question. Are you ready to be the last question, Betty? It has to be a good one. All right.
Great one.
All right.
Would the parish be amenable to parishioners getting together and coming up with the wherewithal to publish William Mercer Green's book on mycology that is beautifully illustrated by his daughter and lives in the Southern Historical Collection at UNC?
So this is Mercer Green or Moses Curtis?
I'm sorry.
Moses.
Moses Ashley Curtis, I misspoke.
So
Yes.
I think anybody that wants to make a little subcommittee to do that, and then you would propose that probably to the vestry, and the vestry would be like, this is awesome. And off we go in our world of mycology. So I would say draw together a proposal and then bring it back to me.
All right, anybody who wants to do this might.
I am desperately trying not to make jokes about mushrooms. But John,
Very briefly,
I think you should be aware that the bicentennial history will be illustrated. And with illustrations from the stained glass windows we have in the church and other illustrations, and the work that Claire Locke has done on describing the stained glass windows, it's really amazing. And so you've got the text, you've got the illustrations, and you have the description of the illustrations, which makes it a really valuable piece of work.
So this book coming out, John is saying that the book coming out in September is not just a PDF stapled together. It's a fully produced color, photos, a lot of gorgeous things, a lot of new history from Alan in it, a lot of work from Claire and the archives committee discussing all these things to put it all together. So look forward to that in the fall. At this point, I need to bring this forum to a close. Thank you for all coming for this. It's going to be an exciting 2.5 years. And I know, as I'm saying, that God is going to do good stuff with us through it all. Thank you.
Way, of course, this one.